Good morning, history kids. Since we are flipping today, um, this is just going to be a quick run through of what we would have talked about in lecture today. Feel free to grab this for notes. I will leave this on Google Classroom for you guys so that you have the basic information that sets us up for next week. Um, Before we get into midterms, we need to talk about something called manifest destiny. Um, as we start to look to the West and go, hey, we need to reform the country, we need to change all these things that you guys have been presenting about, we also realize that we need a little space. So in 1845, this reporter named John L. O'Sullivan really sort of put this together and said it's the nation's manifest destiny to overspread and possess the whole of the continent, which Providence has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty and federated self-government entrusted to us. Well, wow, that's a lot of words. In high school words, basically, he says, look, it's God's will that we expand to the West. We ought to go out West and make good decisions, and we should be in possession of this continent from sea to shining sea. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with us continuing this whole westward push that we've been up to. Um, Historians argue that this begins as early as the first time we set foot on the continent and decide that it's ours and not belonging to the Native Americans. We've had things happen to encourage this already in history with things like the Louisiana Purchase, where we double the size of the country. Things like the Mexican-American War, the Mexican Cession, the Oregon treaties. All these things that have added to the size of the country and have gotten us to this place where we actually claim to own the whole country. Fall under this manifest destiny idea. But in this sort of late 1830s, early 1840s time period, what we know is that Americans are starting to look at this and seeing the West as an opportunity. Um, Especially young Americans. Young Americans look at the West and they go, oh man, this makes us so cool and so interesting. A lot of historians say that a lot of America's identity comes from the idea that we have the West and we can move forward. And there's always been space to grow. Um, it leads to a big political and literary movement. America is in a place where we are trying to find our own identity through literature and through writing and poetry. And um, your last chapter had a ridiculous amount of information about authors, and you'll get a lot of this in your junior year. But that idea of moving west and opportunity and being able to come up with your own unique identity really does tie to this idea that we have space and we can be whatever we want to be. Um, so how do we get from C to C? You're going to see in the next couple of days that step one, we have a pretty aggressive foreign policy. We already consider this land to be ours. It's just a matter of how we make it ours in name. We're going to fight some wars. We're going to just show up and take over sometimes. Um, but we do have a massive economic growth, and with growth comes money, and with money, people all of a sudden want to own land, own a house, own a farm, control their own life instead of living on somebody else's dime. And that territorial acquisition is a big deal too. But we do feel like part of this is not just because we want to go. Part of this is because we feel like we have to go. We see this sense of duty and mission and um, really just doing the right thing by expanding to the West. Number one, to advance civilization to those who are less fortunate, because those poor Native Americans and people living out there, they just don't know any better. So if we can teach them how to live better and bring technology and bring civilization, then everyone will be better off. And the second part of this is we really begin to talk about something called the white man's burden. The white man's burden is this idea that because white people have the best civilization, the best um, social goals and values, and the best ideas about the whole world, anybody who's not white or who's not living like white people needs to be brought around to modern times and modern thoughts. So we kind of have this big onus of we gotta go west. Um, so this is really summarized real well by a guy named Horace Greeley. He was a newspaper publisher. Um, and it's said that one time this kid goes in and talks to him and says, "How do I grow up and be just like you?" Step one, grow the neck beard because it's amazing. Step two, Horace is like, you know, just go west. He says, go west, young man, and grow up with the country. Um, go do those things that America has and use those possibilities. Um, and this is one of those kind of question mark quotes where are we attributing something that is sort of a catchphrase to a famous guy, or did he actually say it? Most historians will give Horace Greeley credit for that one. Um, so why do we go to the West? Why are people going, I can't live in the East Coast anymore? Well, step one, it's congested. It is full of humans. And there are so many people that real estate is becoming expensive. It's hard to find somewhere to live. It's hard to find a farm. And so people look to the West and they go, well, there's a whole bunch of open land out there. Probably I should show up and make my own life. We also run into the Panic of 1837, where you have several years of an economic depression, where people are losing jobs, they're not being as successful, and when you're poor with nothing to do, either you cause a ruckus in the streets, or you just simply look for opportunity elsewhere. And we also have this really interesting moment with the Second Great Awakening, where we're changing religion. We're changing it to be more American. We're coming up with new ideas and new beliefs and discovering new things. And with that comes some questions where people who believe what we've always believed don't necessarily agree with those who are new. And so there are opportunities out west to express your religious freedom, to start your own sort of place, to um, really kind of invoke uh, that First Amendment right of freedom of religion without really being bothered for it. There are a bunch of criticisms, believe it or not, of Manifest Destiny. This is not just a hooray, we're going west sort of moment. People say that Manifest Destiny is number one, a justification for American expansion. We're looking for a reason to expand. We're looking for an excuse to take over all this territory. So the idea of Manifest Destiny is simply a really good way to explain what we're up to. The second one is simply rationalizing greed and imperialism. We don't need all this land. We don't want all this land. It's not full. We're taking it away from the people who used to live there. We're using it as a reason to go to war because wars are really profitable. And so you get into all these people who say Manifest Destiny is the worst thing that ever happened. I think in the guise of world history, somebody was going to move out west on the American continent, whether it was going to be the Russians moving down from Alaska, whether it was going to be Chinese or Japanese people coming in from the east, whether it was going to be Canadians moving from the north, Mexicans from the south, somebody was going to fill up the western part of the country. It's just a matter of how we do it. So this is a really famous painting from this era looking at Manifest Destiny. Of course, the angel of westward expansion has come down to bless us with things like the stagecoach and the railroad and telegraph wires, and she's driving out the darkness that is on the left side of the picture, where you've got the buffalo and the Indians and the bears and all these people who are having hard times. And this is really how most Americans saw it, is that we're really bringing light to darkness. We'll do a lot with American art next Wednesday. There's some really, really cool stuff that comes out in this time period that's truly American. So we'll take some time to look at that next week. So if you are going to move west, if you are part of that go west young man or young woman and grow up with the country, there are some basic rules that you absolutely have to follow. Rule number one, you need to follow an established trail. Sometimes people set out alone. Sometimes you set out in a wagon train with a group of wagons. Sometimes people went with family. Sometimes they went alone. But those trails westward are established and they are created for a reason. So many Americans use those same trails and they go over them for years and years and years. That when you look at those trails today, you can actually still see in a lot of places the wheel ruts from so many wagons going over the same place. Number two, you have to deal effectively with any Indians that you run into. You can't show up and be like, hey, you're different. I'm in charge now. You have to respect the fact that they own the land. You're just there visiting while you travel somewhere else. Try not to get into a war. Try not to make them mad. Again, we'll talk about this more next week. Point three, you have to bring in enough essentials to make it all the way to wherever you're going. Because there is no Walmart partway through. There is no place to resupply unless there's already been some people who got there before you. But not so much that you load yourself down. Think about going on a hiking trip. You got to have enough food to make it a couple of days while you go camping and you go down the trail. But you also don't want to bring an entire carload of food because you never actually get up the first hill. So there really is a balance between what you are doing and where you're going. Um, so as you go west, there's a bunch of trails that you can choose. The most famous is the Oregon Trail. Um, Most of these started somewhere on the Mississippi or in the western parts of our territory. And what you're going to do is you're going to move westward. And at some point you choose to stop. Some people go all the way to Oregon City, Salt Lake City, Sutter's Fort, to Santa Fe. And some people choose to stop along the way because they find a place that they would actually enjoy living. So these aren't necessarily like through routes for everybody. Some people stop in Idaho. But this is really how people go. Um, yes, at some point you have to go over the mountains. Yes, at some point you have to go over a river. You're going in wagons that are actually really versatile. It looks like a big honking thing, like you're driving a car. But all these are made of wood, and they're all made of things that are able to be disassembled. Thinking about it like traveling on a box of Legos. It's really solid, it's really great until you want it to be broken off. And then if you have to go up a hill, you can actually take this sucker in pieces and drag it over a hill. Imagine trying to go over the Rocky Mountains. At some point, you gotta just drag pieces of your wagon up and over some of these hills that you just can't drive up. Um, so it's a weird sort of method of travel, but it's actually really smart in how we engineer the whole thing. But it also means that you have to be smart about how to fix it. Because again, there's no place to stop and fix your wagon if you're in the middle of nowhere. There's no AAA to call. So people had to be smart about how to fix your issues, or you were going to be stuck wherever you got stuck. Um, these wagons are not as big as you want to think they are. I like this picture number one because Mom looks so tired and grumpy. But imagine being in one of these wagons all day long, every day, jostling over every single bump in the road, you and all of your supplies and all of your friends and all of your kids in one little small wagon. It gets really stressful. It gets really um, unhappy. It's not the funnest car trip you've ever taken in your life. Um, so where does the Oregon Trail end? Well, here's the thing. We're going to do a Forced Family Fun Time photo adventure because I'm from there. Um, so I was born in Lake Oswego, which is right next to the Dalles. At the end of the Oregon Trail, you stopped at the city of the Dalles and you took a little trip down a river and you ended up in Oregon City. Yes, Oregon City is a place and you can go there on a really, really painful trip every time you go visit the grandparents. And Oregon City is actually quite beautiful. Oregon City is known for the Oregon City Elevator, which is apparently the first municipal elevator that gets you up the hill to the next part of the town. I don't know. As a kid, it was free. We rode it a lot. But within this elevator are all sorts of murals and paintings about the Oregon Trail and being the end of the Oregon Trail, and they're super proud of that. Very close by, there's an End of the Oregon Trail museum where they've gone so far as to take three-story buildings and put them under wagon covers, which I don't understand, but people do cool stuff. Other reasons that you might go out to the west, well, once people head out west, they start to realize that, hey, land is free, things are great, and all of a sudden we're going to discover gold. In 1848, we discover gold at Sutter's Mill in California. And that is the first time that we discover gold out there. And we're going to end up, if you look at the map, discovering gold all over California. Um, and it gets a little crazy. In the first year, 4,000 people rushed to California. Over the course of the next few years, California's size is going to double and double and double on itself. And thousands of people are going to go out to California looking for gold and getting their fortunes. It's the kind of thing where all of a sudden, if people were just finding coins that were laying around, you could be rich after a while. Same thing is happening here. People are finding gold nuggets, small and large. And this not only builds up the gold stores of America, it builds up people's fortune. Um, Of the people who went out west, 5% are women and children, so it's mostly a dude's race out there. 10% are Chinese, which I think is a kind of a cool stat. Because remember, this is a global movement. People are coming from America, but they're also coming from Europe and Asia and South America to find their fortunes. It's one of the reasons why California is so incredibly diverse. Because the gold rush really brings out thousands of people from all around the world who make their fortune and they decide, you know what? Gold's pretty awesome, and so is California, so they decide to stay. It's why the San Francisco professional football team is called the 49ers, and their mascot is this kind of weird looking dude who looks like he's about to go mining. That's because he is about to go mining. That's where California really gets most of its population from. There are a whole bunch of other major gold strikes that happen outside of California. You have three really famous ones at Cripple Creek, Colorado, Fraser River, Canada, and Comstock Lode in Nevada. By 1896, people are going to run out of gold down in the south, and they're going to make their way up to Alaska, and you'll see the Klondike Gold Rush happen in the late 1890s. And what all of this population brings is a need for stuff. People show up and they're going to mine for gold, but they also are going to need a place to sleep, a place to eat, a way to get food, all sorts of things that are going to help us do stuff. So what pops up are something called boom towns. These appear almost overnight with saloons and stores and banks and places to sleep and campsites and all that kind of thing. And when the gold runs out, people leave these spots almost overnight, and you end up with ghost towns. Ghost towns are ex-boom towns that become tourist spots, ski spots. A lot of them are still deserted. Some of them have set themselves up as come visit this ghost town for a scary Halloween adventure. Some of them, my favorite is the Ghost Town Disc Golf Sanctuary, where you can go visit this ghost town and play frisbee. People have a lot of things. There's actually, if you look it up, there's a ghost town tour of Idaho that you can take if you ever want to go on a vacation to ghost towns. And you can see what's the kind of the remnants of all of this kind of crazy hustle out west. So just real quickly, planning ahead for next week. On Monday, we're going to do a whole bunch more with Western Expansion. Tuesday, you have a Chapter 17 quiz, so please get started reading for this weekend. And we'll play the Oregon Trail. Wednesday, we're going to talk about American art and the Hudson River School and kind of how that all works. And then Thursday, Friday will be your cautionary tale, how not to go to the West. We're going to talk about the Donner Party and the doom that comes with that. So hope this is helpful. I will leave this up on Google Classroom for you guys.